Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Lasmi Kedavong, Communications Manager at the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, or NAPAF. NAPAF is the only national organization that focuses on public policy advocacy through organizing for Asian American and Pacific Islander women, girls, and gender-expansive people in the U.S. On behalf of NAPAF, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel discussion, Art and Power Intersect, Creative Media for Advocacy, a virtual event celebrating and closing out Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. From the more obvious examples of rally posters to abstract expressions of protest and advocacy through visual and performing arts, these creative forms have helped artists communicate their perspectives, question the status quo in power, and move their audiences and fellow community members to act. Art can be an instrument for addressing political issues and changing social structures, and it has the power to call out injustice as well as to instill hope for a better future. Art is a powerful connecting force, and that is what brings us all together today. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and for those of you joining us on YouTube, you can add your questions to the comments as well. We will save time at the end to address your thoughts and questions. Joining us today are three very talented creatives working in different media, uplifting the experience and voices of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. Amanda Pung-Boribakia is a transdisciplinary artist, educator, and community builder based in Brooklyn, New York. The daughter of Thai and Indonesian immigrants, her practice spans sculpture, textile, painting, installation, and public art. Through defined storytelling, her work brings forth colors, patterns, textures, histories, and rituals to amplify marginalized voices. Amanda has investigated how to create liminal spaces that can serve as conduits for healing and transformation. Janet S. Kim is a filmmaker, writer, and photographer based out of New York City who specializes in finding stories that reflect experiences from unexpected spaces. Her short film, Speak Chinglish, premiered at CamFest in 2016 with other narrative credits, including content for Sesame Street, Amazon Prime, NBC, HBO, as well as commercial work. She debuted her film, Feeling Asian American, which explores the emotional journeys of 5 individuals who navigated their way through their own racial reckonings in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic during the height of anti-Asian hate that not only continues to ripple out today, but also brings up echoes of the past. They found community, connection, and self. Natalie Bui is a visual movement artist who aims to uplift and highlight the cultural narratives, stories, and issues our communities navigate today. Her background in policy, nonprofits, organizing, and facilitation shapes the way she depicts joy, community care, and power. In the past, she's worked with organizations such as 18 Million Rising, Planned Parenthood, Advancing Justice Atlanta, Asian Prisoner Support Committee, AAPI Equity Alliance, Empower Change, and drawing their campaigns and advocacy efforts. In her free time, you'll find her curled up with the latest contemporary fiction novel, preferably a romance one. Welcome, panelists. We are so thankful for your time today. Honored to share this space with you and looking forward to hearing your thoughts and wisdom during this engaging conversation. And if there's anything you'd like to add to your introductions, I would love to give you the opportunity to do so. Okay, if not, we can get started. Oh, sorry, Natalie, were you unmuting?
Just if you need romance novel book recs, I got you. So message me on the side. I have all the categories for them.
Awesome. Thank you for that note. All righty, so we'll get started with a statistic, an emphasis on why there's a need to cultivate the sense of belonging, because we do belong, both in areas like the creative fields in which you work and here in this country. 25% of Asian Americans believe they are somewhat underrepresented or not represented at all in both the areas of arts and pop culture. So the fact that you all are working in these spaces is so important for representation and so meaningful to API communities. Seeing ourselves in spaces contributes to a sense of belonging that can be motivating and empowering because historically we have been invisibilized. In these times, it is especially important to have and nurture that hope that can motivate people to take action. So my question to you is, what actions do we take to ensure that AAPIs are appropriately and respectfully represented? How do you approach this in your work? And what do you think that this representation does for movements and advocacy and activism? I'm going to go with the unmute. So whoever goes first. I feel, Natalie, you're up.
Yeah, I can go. One, thanks for having us on. Such an honor to be alongside Amanda and Janet. So thanks for having us, and such an honor to share space with you both. This question, I've been, the opening, I've been really sitting with that question of like how important belonging is and representation in what. And I think what I've been really sitting with recently, I feel a lot of like contention with that and trying to navigate through that. And I think because Viet Thanh Nguyen, I'm sure many of you all are really familiar with, has been posing this question about like, what are we striving to belong in? What are we striving to be included in? And what does being included in these systems do? And what do they what do they cost along the way? I've been really, really sitting with like what that means. And I don't have a clear answer on that, but I do keep coming back to what does it mean to find ways to not just belong in institutions, but belonging to each other? And what is that reframing? Like how do we come back to that? What does that look like? And in a more practical sense, when I think about like Asian American representation, man, I've been really sitting with what does it mean to disaggregate that acronym even more? Like I'm seeing so many of us within the Asian American community really gravitate towards our own cultural like representation, like a lot of excitement around like specifically like more not just Asian American narratives, but maybe more Korean narratives, maybe more Vietnamese authors, maybe more like Thai art. Like I'm seeing more of that draw, not in a way to disconnect us or untether us from that acronym, but reminding us that, oh my God, there's so much nuance even within those specific identities that I think to accurately represent us is to allow all that complexity and that difference. And I'm sensing this, like, what I feel like I'm witnessing is this like craving to like get more specific into that. And again, not to disconnect us, but maybe to even like remind us more of like the ways we are connected, the ways we are tethered, our historical responsibility to one another, our solidarity with one another, but still finding the distinctiveness in that. I'll start with that.
That resonates so much with me, this sort of draw towards specificity. I think specificity is so important, but in the sense that it also allows for an expansiveness collectively. It's sort of like if, we don't get specific, then certain specific narratives are missing. And if those narratives aren't included in the collective, then we have a warped sort of sense of what and who we are collectively. But I guess I'll just share that in my own practice, a lot of my process centers around ethnographic exploration. So a lot of the work is rooted back to, people, everyday people, and me having conversations with folks about their lived experiences. Certainly a lot of my work is drawn from my own lived experience of being kind of suspended between worlds. I'm mixed Asian American, which means, I'm never Thai or Indonesian or Chinese or American enough, whatever space I'm in. And, that lends itself to sort of making work that sort of materializes or embodies this precariousness that I often feel where, it's sort of like that moment when you're having a vulnerable moment with someone else and you reveal something about your identity or lived experience, and it can either go both ways. It can be sort of like this cool breeze that's like, oh, okay, that's where we're going, or this sort of like this whole world of warmth and care and compassion just sort of like floods through. But I also just wanted to go back to some of the statistics that you shared and just offer a sort of neuroscience or scientific perspective. I don't know if y'all know, but my background is as a neuroscientist. And what I was studying was aging. How do we age gracefully? So I wanted to, study something that impacted sort of everyone on the planet. And well, we all age. So it seemed like a good question to ask. And the salient finding that came out of our lab was it's community ties. That's what allows us to age gracefully. It doesn't matter how much you sleep, what you eat, how much exercise you get, even genetically. The thing that is the strongest predictor of aging well with your mental faculties intact is how close your community ties are. And it's what inspired me to actually quit and focus my work on cultivating community and belonging. And, I think so many of us, especially coming out of the pandemic, just forgot how to be together, forgot how to be together with the embracing of tension and conflict, which is a normal part of being in community. Community is messy because it's human, because we love hard, and we care so much. And that's also the deep beauty of it too.
Amanda, not to get too personal, but I literally found my first gray hair yesterday. So thank you for speaking to but I feel like to add on to what Natalie and Amanda said, I don't know. So I teach at a BFA program upstate. And one of the things that I find that a lot of the students of color are running into, and just when you make media that is seen, is we feel this responsibility to represent everyone as a whole, as a monolith, what is the good version of us. And I really appreciate the fact that both Natalie and Amanda have really just they've talked about sitting in the human uncomfortable specific spaces. And one of the things that I've realized, I've realized in my own practice is who am I? What am I actually interested in? As a person, what makes me spark up? What makes me feel good? And, at the end of the day, we are who we are. We can't hide our race. We can't hide our experience. And I think just sitting in the fact that we just by existing and then making the things that we make, we represent. And so my questions usually revolve around how do we do that well? How do we do that with integrity? How do we do that and kind of speak truth to those details that are important to all of us? Because I don't think the specificity divides anyone. I think it's when we try to speak for literally every single person within each diaspora, and then each part, or all Asian women or all Korean women or all Asian Americans. I think those details are interesting for sure. And I think they're very authentic, but I think that specificity plus the humanity, and then us just being who we are. I mean, we just by the fact of our existence, I think that is the activism, right? Not kowtowing to what people are constantly tell us that they want to see from us. I think as artists, we have to answer to institution, and we have to answer to capitalism. We have to answer to society. But how do we maintain who we are as self before, and translate that in a way so we can still protect our practice? And I think that takes a lot of time, and that takes a lot of examination, and it's deeply, deeply unsexy work. But I also think it's really, really important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the 3 people we have today. It's really cool.
Thank you. All of your responses, I've kind of drawn out some of the phrases that stood out to me, specifically about data disaggregation, and about community and belonging to one another, and aging in relation to each other. And Janet, you just brought up some great points about how we, from where we stand, have to bring forth in our work, whatever it is that we do, our experiences. And so I feel like that describes representation really well, but not in the way that in the question, right, it was posed as representation matters. And so we need to talk about it, but in a way that is really true to who we are. And so, yes, thank you for that point about having y'all on this panel, the three of you, in this space and in this time together. Any additional thoughts to that question that y'all want to share or? Okay, so,
Sorry.
oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I will just add sort of like another kind of sort of neuroscience, but mostly sort of like embodied experience. Like I feel like so much of our trauma lives in the body. I don't know if y'all have read The Body Keeps Score, but you know that intergenerational trauma is in there, lives in our bones, lives in, you know, our soul. But beyond that, when we feel isolated or alone, our bodies react as if we had experienced physical harm. So, you know, the science backs up what we innately know and feel, which is why we crave so deeply a sense of safety and belonging with others. And I think this is why we're so driven to cultivate that.
Yeah, if I can also, yeah, Janet and Amanda, thank you. That's so beautiful. Bringing in the science behind it, and like I'm really sitting with the community is what like can help prolong life, and just seeing the deep isolation and loneliness that is happening in our world and how that can turn into harm and violence. And so that's landing on me a lot. And Janet, I'm like I'm reflecting on what you shared about like what is our story that we want to tell when we don't have the weight of representation on us. I've been really sitting with that too, and I feel like I've been wondering, and I don't have the answer to this, but I've been wondering. I'm seeing it a lot in like Vietnamese authors that I admire trying to break away from the narrative of being like children of refugees, and like what is the story we would tell if it wasn't just about that, but also can we isolate ourselves from that? Like, do we even want to? It's impossible to like remove that is our story, right? To the intergenerational trauma that gets built on that is our story. That's a part of story. We can't remove that. But I also do sometimes wonder, in my heart of hearts, what stories would I tell if it wasn't based on that? And what is the expansiveness that comes from that? And I'm seeing a craving amongst Vietnamese creatives of like still needing to talk about the war, but also not wanting to talk about the war, and like what are we moving towards? And I think that's something I'm trying to lean more into my practice, as it's historically been really focused on refugee identity, intergenerational wounds and healing. What's beyond that too? And I've been really trying to examine that.
That's so real, that sort of what you brought up with so many artists of color being
Yeah.
expected by institutions to perform our identities, and sort of like navigating the nuances of what is our identity, but sort of like what we're interested in exploring or interrogating at any given moment, which doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, sort of like a refugee story or the children of immigrants story, or, you know, all of the all of the stories that, you know, we see so often, which are a part of us. But you know, maybe we're more interested in exploring just this one part of it, and you know, we should have the agency and the freedom and the space to do that. But then, of course, with balancing capitalism and the institutional voice and all of these things, Janet, that you brought up that impact, you know, how work gets made and how we share it comes into play as well. So we are sometimes constrained. So I'm sitting with that too. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
I just feel like, what is the and? Like, we are allowed to have all these tiny rooms that we exist within. And like, also, why can't it be all the things? Like, we don't only want to be like, oh, children of refugees, but we don't only want to talk about our pets. But what if we are like children of immigrants who want to read romance novels that talk about our pets that have big feelings, you know? And like it was so funny because like they had these two students. One was she's like Iranian Chilean mixed Muslim girl, and then the last Black female student in this present year sophomore cohort because I teach sophomores, and both of them were like the Iranian Chilean girl was like, I don't know any hijabi filmmakers. I don't know anyone who looks like me, and I feel like am I educating? And she just like I was like, we'll just talk about what because I teach documentary, and so she was just like, she ended up making something about her relationship with the hijab, right? And it was deeply, deeply, deeply personal. And it was like she was a teen and the whole like normalizing of where she did not have to explain anything at all, except maybe some translations of Arabic, right? Just so we knew what was being said. And then the similar thing with the Black female student where she was tasked by her last year, like her freshman professor, and told you have to stay in the program to represent all Black women. And then she wanted to do her film about Black love, but couldn't move past what she wanted. Right. And so, like, it was just like you could make your film about ducks. It will still be a Black female film because you made it. And then she ended up making this beautiful film about her relationship with hair and similarly like did not explain or she was like, I don't want to do hair tutorial for white people, like because the majority of the cohort's white. And there's this default to like, again, these institutions, capitalism are run by like white supremacy. So and like how do we utilize that language to still again protect what we want, but to do that and to do our work, we still need to know who we are and like protect that. And so I think a lot about or I love that you brought up the neuroscience of it because it's like, oh, how can I organize my brain so that all these things can exist within like us at once so that we can move forward? Because like, Natalie, what if you write a romance novel? I don't know. Or like Amanda, what if you make this like art that is a brain something with light and sculpture and we get to live like that's so freaking cool, right? Like all these things are possible because it's you and only you, but like the Asianness and those like little details are the thing way in and it's just the way in, it's just the beginning and it's a lot to hold, right? When you're only seen a certain way and you're told a certain way and then culturally we're also told to represent a certain way that maybe, is good or for better or for worse, but messes with us. And so I think about that a lot because, it's something very real that's like hardwired in all of us because for whatever reason, right? I don't know. I really appreciate how you guys think about it. So
No, I appreciate how you brought up protection, of course, of your own practice and self, but also I feel like so many of us work with community members and just wanted to raise as well, when working with institutions or very large organizations, there is also, uh, a responsibility that falls on the artist to protect our collaborators, community members that we work with that, we're accountable to. And yeah, I'm just curious how y'all think about that. And, maybe there are some anecdotes that you have about sort of, offering that protection.
therapy. There,
Yes.
therapy, having conversations with other like cool people. I mean, I work at a university and then I produce and direct commercials and film and television, and those are primarily very white spaces and white institutions. And there was a point in time for me where I think the both of you have brought up like community and like being true to your emotions. And I just kind of led with that all the time. So whenever I see another woman of color on set, it'd be like, you are my best friend. I don't know, but like you just, you had the girl moment where you just know. And I know it's really silly, but it's just like kind of these little ways to like you have like refuge in each other, and it gives you courage to also take refuge in yourself, right? And then find the refuges in the world, because it's like we can take what we need from institution, but then it's like what does the community look like when you're not just obligated? Like, what does it look like when it's authentic and it's an ecosystem and organic, a little bit more organic to all our stuff. But it was usually in that moment where I'd be like, you, hi, did you see? And it's the glance across the room. And I really, really, the more that I work and the longer my career has been, that has saved me and served me really well. And I will never, ever, ever not try to be a fan of another person that I see. If I see something that I like, I will very enthusiastically like I will be very enthusiastic and tell you exactly why I like it and why I like you. And because I think that's also really important, like that's but like just being able to see each other is, I don't know, I didn't have that. So if I can do that in my work, in my interaction, that's really important to me.
I have a response to that last week. I know you have like more questions too. Is it okay if I respond?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm loving, this is what we're here for. So if we don't get to any questions that I've like listed, not a problem. I love this discussion. Thank you all so much.
I have an example, and Amanda, thank you for asking that question. I have an example, not necessarily of like, what does it look like to the responsibility to uplift our community stories and like do it like with integrity. Not necessarily maybe protection, but more of I'm thinking of it as like, what is expansive solidarity? Like, what can that look like? An anecdote I had was a really wonderful partnership with a really wonderful org named Southeast Asian Resource Action Center, otherwise known as CRAC. There was a moment when we were trying to illustrate how important it is to disaggregate our data and not use Asian AANHPI. I think it's no longer serving us. And so we've been really advocating for like, we need to disaggregate that data. And so it became a focus group of like, what are the stories that we want to tell and around that? And there was one very specific request that came from a Pacific Islander group. They were like, as you continue writing about this or illustrating this, we need our own section. And it was like, yes, of course, absolutely. So when I took that back to CRAC, and I want to say this was like, I think a really beautiful model of like ways to practice expansive solidarity. CRAC was like, at first, they were like, oh, I mean, we would like to do that, but that's outside of our policy expertise because we are Southeast Asian. So we don't feel comfortable like making a whole separate illustration narrative just around Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders because it's out. And the reasoning was because we don't have any policy experts on that. And then I couldn't not like push back because that person felt so strongly like, if you're asking us for our input, we need our own section. And so when I brought that back up to them, they were like, okay. It was more of like, they've always been swallowed under Asian American. And even within Southeast Asian, I'm learning how much, as someone who's Viet, how much Vietnamese takes up space in Southeast Asian. And I use that as an example. And then they were just like, okay, then we'll do it and we'll publish it, And it was a moment of like not trying to fall back on like, oh, we don't know a lot about it, so can we really publish anything about it? But they just were like, no, that's what they asked to do, and so we'll make its own separate moment. And I will always remember that moment as a like, I think we always default to like what we know and like, oh, we can't speak on that, so we shouldn't like share it. And I know there's nuance around that too, but I think it was a practice of like expansive solidarity. It was like, that's what they requested, and that's the least we could do, as especially we're talking about data disaggregation,
It doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
I think we get caught up in the perfect, like,
Yeah.
oh, we're not gonna get it right. There's so many. I'm like, yeah, but we gotta try. Otherwise, we erase them again,
Yeah. And also like the idea that like people are going to be mad at us, right? For not doing it perfectly. And like, as artists, like when we put our stuff out, it's like, oh my God, like that sometimes is the question, right? Are people going to respond and receive it?
Yeah.
Are they going to like it, right? And it's like, okay, if somebody doesn't, we're old enough for like if someone doesn't jive with your stuff, it's okay. But I think in the same way, organizationally, like if someone if there's people that have critique or feedback about how the imperfect thing came about, like then what are they like, what's the note behind the note? Like what are we really trying to get to so we can continue to evolve that, as opposed to being like, yeah.
I think also in process, you know, sort of like to make resonant work, it's like we all engage our communities in creating it, even if we don't belong to those communities. It's like we're inviting community members to be part of the work, and we're really inviting them to teach us if they want,
Mhm.
and to give sort of like very honest, unfiltered feedback, and you know, we'll take that and see if the organizations that we partner with are willing to learn alongside us and expand alongside us.
That part. Mhm.
So beautiful. I think I was in the room, Natalie, with that discussion in a past lifetime when I worked with a different organization. And so if y'all haven't seen Natalie's work on data disaggregation done in partnership with CREC as their artists in residence in 2023 or 24, the years are blending together. But if you haven't, they're really beautiful, really informative, and I think a great way to kind of turn infographics into something that is just a little more easy to digest and understand that information. So yeah, thank you. I really love the flow of this discussion, so I don't even want to go to my canned questions. But I'm sure that this question will bring up even more brilliant discussion. So I did want to ask about y'all's thoughts about the saying that all art is political. So for context, right, when we're making or creating, our final products are tied to that specific time that they were created in, that place, the environment, the moment in history, and there's that certain socio-political context. So that's what I'm referring to when I say political. And so for me, my understanding is that at the very least, whether your work consciously or directly engages with political themes or not, artwork can and will be interpreted within the time that it's created. So the framework or power of that time, the ideologies, the social movements happening, changes happening then. Sometimes the art is in agreement, sometimes it's in resistance. In the beginning slides of this event, I dropped in Shazia Seconder's Witness, which was a sculpture at the University of Houston that was beheaded, and you know, but I'll stop there, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that saying, whether you agree or disagree, if it needs some reworking, what your understandings are, and all that.
I don't know if it needs reworking, but I think for me, art is not made in a vacuum, right? And you know, we tell on ourselves through our work, whether it's like we're wrestling with something, or I think in relation to, and I think a lot of times art is held on this like pedestal where it's just like, oh, it's the skill and it's this talent, but I'm like, all those skills and talents are crafted by the nature. It's like, you know, when and where and who you are and how you were. And so I think art is like whether or not I think it's going to tell on ourselves, and I think what we decide to do with it is something. I do agree with it, but I don't know if I don't know, it's like it's something to chew on quite often. Um Back in 2022, when I was creating like the first Asian puppet for Sesame Street, right? And it was a really big deal for like all the Muppet nerds in the world. They were really upset because, you know, Sesame Street decided to create a bunch of little kid characters that were actually flesh toned and had actual backgrounds. And, you know, the humanoids were always like lemon yellow, lavender, pumpkin, blue, lime, right? So they were like humanoids, but they weren't real people, right? And the research was coming out that all the monsters and the puppets were reading as white. So, and we can't put child actors through like traumatizing things on camera, even if we're discussing them in a really child-friendly way. And it became a thing where it was contention even amongst I should not drop this tea when I'm being recorded. I don't care. But like there's, between like even the puppeteers, right? We're having issues with it. They were like, we are totally kowtowing to I should stop saying that word, but we are totally bending to this like woke thing. But that character is my kid and it comes from a real place. And special is all about, you know, her having an experience off camera, like being told to go back to where she came from and then like her figuring out who she is through all her friends in the neighborhood, right? And it's just like a little kid story that happens to all of us at some point, but it became this like political thing, and it is political in the sense that we were like, oh, is that us are allowed being allowed again to exist wholly, right, as a child, as ourselves, and then trying to figure out our path and not just be like, it's special to my family because I am Asian. It's like, no, because do you know what I mean? And so it doesn't necessarily like I don't know. I don't think it necessarily, I think it's a mistake to not take into account all the context and the person that's making art. I think that's for me, I think all art is political needs to be expanded and like evolved a little bit to include what that means altogether. Also, in this time, the world is burning and it's really difficult right now. So our existence just feels political and our thriving feels political. So I might be coming from that place.
Thank you.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think we don't make work in a vacuum. We're often responding to what is, certainly happening to us, but sort of in the realm around us. And I also think that art that moves us to action, art that is deeply resonant, always expresses a very strong point of view because it comes from somewhere real. This idea that, art should be for everyone and everyone should love it. I really don't agree with because, so much of the work I make, there's definitely folks in the population that it's not for. And it's by design. And I think, if we were to just create things that were pretty, that's decoration. It's not art. And art, has to reach somewhere deep and pull real things to the surface for people to respond to. And, that response may be sort of an expansive acceptance and embracing, or it may be, a very violent pushback. And both are part of our process of putting things into the world that we hope holds the people that we're working with, or defiantly rebukes something happening in the world. All of this sort of tension is necessary for there to be evolution in public sentiment, there to be sort of like a reaction to what we've said through our work.
Oh, Natalie, we can't hear you, but I see you speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Amanda, and what you said about like, that's not art, that's decoration. It makes me think of that poem, Fuck Your Lecture on Craft, My People Are Dying by Noor Hindi. And I think it's a poem that's literally calling out, like, you get to write about and draw flowers while my people are dying, it makes me think of that poem. I've been really I'm sitting with our conversation about like the ways I think my art has been overtly political, and that is in response to institution and trying to get validated in institution, and like in that validation of institution perpetuates me to create more overtly like political art. And then I think I'm just in my own examination of sometimes I am sitting with the subtlety too of when it's not overt, and when can it be subtle and still be so profound and still be so beautiful. Yeah, I'm sitting with like the authors that write about like messy Asian characters that like are living messy romantic lives. I know I keep bringing up the romance, but I'm thinking like
Good.
like How to End a Love Story by Yulin Quang. Like I love that. It's an Asian romantic lead, but it's not necessarily discussing Asian politics, but her identity is in there, right? And like, and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, how expansive that can be when we allow that part of it too. Yeah, I'm sitting with like what I agree. I think yes, art is political, everything is political. And I think what needs to be reframed is that when we say everything is political, like I think another way of thinking it is because people sometimes feel so off put when we say like, oh, everything is political. I'm like, well, because it is, but I think another way to think about it is that everything is connected.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's what we're
Yeah.
saying.
Mhm.
That everything is connected. And when you see that everything is connected, you'll see that it's all a part of these systems we named, like white supremacy, imperialism, capitalism. Then you can see your role in perpetuating all of this. And so maybe I've been craving more of a like, maybe not necessarily always like, oh, everything is political. Okay, then let's just say everything is connected. And then what is our responsibility in all of that?
Mhm.
I
I really,
will carry that reframing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Amanda.
no, please, please, please.
That, yeah, I think my life just changed a little bit there with the idea, right? Everything is connected. Art is connected and connective. Yeah. Amanda?
We live in such a individualistic society. I think, we often have to consciously seek interdependence and sort of like that lens. Um, it's a very sort of like colonial, imperialist, capitalist way to be like, it's just me on my little island, and I'm gonna try to do my thing. But I was just going to reflect on um, we don't also always have to kind of approach the work we make with a certain lens. We can ask and invite people to walk through portals of healing and also portals of defiance. They can exist simultaneously in our work. And I think part of sort of this broader discussion of like what kind of art we're allowed to make is a challenge of every artist to get pigeonholed into sort of like the thing they're best known for, right? You make this kind of art. You make protest signs, infographics, films, whatever. But we contain multitudes as do our communities. So then to be an artist that brings multitudes into the world is just sort of like a reflection of who we are and kind of the nature of our communities too. So I think kind of like asserting that is so important, but also deeply challenging, just given kind of the nature of the fields, and the support available, and how our world loves to just put people in boxes. Because it's simpler, it's more organized. It's cleaner that way. But I think we all know how messy and beautiful both art making and community building is. So I'm here for more of that kind of messy interdependence.
That needs to be on a sweatshirt. Messy interdependence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We all walk away with a new product line of the things that we've said in this conversation. So we tell on
I love
ourselves.
it. It's our new collaboration.
Mhm. Wonderful. I love it.
I love that like conversations about community is messy. I
Yeah.
think I think we romanticize what community is. Sometimes it's like the dinner parties, the like glam, the like when the community is also like picking my friend up from LAX, which sucks, but I'll do it, or like it's I remember reading a post about like community is also meaning like allowing people to be messy, but also allowing yourself to be inconvenienced. It's not always about the like picnic parties. It's allowing yourself to be inconvenienced, to like
Yeah.
drop everything to babysit your friend's kid when their babysitter canceled. And like, I'm saying that because I could be better at that, right? Because I think we're all like exhausted. So it's easy to like be like, I need my downtime. But I'm loving this shift of like, no, we don't need self-care. We need more community care, right? And but I'm still in that practice. I'm still shifting gears into like, yeah, allowing myself to be more inconvenienced in service of community. So I appreciate the conversations of like messy interdependence.
Yeah.
It's gonna be messy.
Or like making, or just like us being allowed to fail.
Yeah.
That look like? Does it have to be perfect?
Mhm.
Like, because failure, what is really failure? It's like, oh, you making like it's a learning opportunity. Like I hate those buzzwords, but you know, it is an opportunity for you to like take a lesson if you can. And maybe it's not the lesson you wanted or anticipated or whatever, but like it will lead to something. You learn something different every single time. And it's like instead of being like, they suck because they didn't fold it properly. And then it's like, okay, well, can you see what they were going for? You don't have to be a big fan just because they're also Asian, but you can at least grant the grace to be like, oh, what are like, because by people showing up, like the inconvenience of like allowing people to be making mistakes and then also for us to be like you know, learning from these opportunities that they've also presented to you, like it's okay. What is perfect,
Mhm.
you know? Like I feel like because stuff is so hard right now, there's more pressure to deliver perfectly, to be the perfect friend, to be the perfect artist, and I think lean into the mess of it all to be like, yeah, I will show up. I maybe, you know, I'll show up at 4 a.m. and my car won't be washed and whatever, but I'm here. Or like I will have had this cool idea and I'm trying to build it out and they've accepted it. I'm going to present it and we'll just see how it's received and get the feed. It's just information, right? And so it's like, how do we use that mess to like connect without it being like, I don't know, adjudicated almost or like controlled? Like, who is that for?
Mhm.
Like, where's that voice
I,
coming from? Yeah.
no, I relate to that so much. I think imperfection is an opportunity for compassion, both self-compassion and also compassion for others, because I think there's something deeply beautiful about things that are imperfect. Like I love, like most of my work, most of my labor is hand labor because I have such a deep love for how you can tell it was made by hand. Like if something is woven by a machine versus if it's woven by hand, you immediately know because sort of like the fibers are, a little bit more scraggly and there's texture when it's woven by hand. And I think there's such a relationship between um, imperfection and what we need to cultivate more of, which is like compassion broadly. Because I don't know, I didn't grow up with a lot of compassion in the house. So, I'm in the practice of cultivating more of that for myself, so that I can have boundaries, so I can have, mental well-being, and also so that I can, show up in the most powerful way for others, because it's sort of like, when we don't pour into ourselves, when we don't have boundaries, then sort of like we're not our best.
Yeah. Let's be messy together and support each other in that messiness, right? Um, we are coming up to Q&A time. So we're going to skip our last question, but we do have audience inquiries that we'll address. Our first question is, what are your recommendations on books, art, media, etc., that has deepened your understanding of how you engage with your work and creativity as AAPI creators?
I get inspired a lot by, honestly, Black feminists because they are the originators of so many powerful and deeply knowing movements. So, bell hooks for me is always, you know, poetry literature that I fall back on when I'm in need of guidance.
Mm,
I love bell hooks.
yeah.
Ooh, Natalie still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Most recently, Ocean Vuong's.
Ugh.
I know, right? Like,
Oh.
my God. Like the modeling of tenderness and
Oh,
softness, like
God.
that interview, that
Yeah.
that where he like talk about being messy, like talked about, yeah, that interview, that New York Times interview that's up on
Yeah.
you. Oh my God, like, and every time he speaks, it sounds like he wants to cry, and like that captures how I want to move through the world. Like I want to cry all the time in a good, like I
Me
love
too.
but then his is like bursting. So most recently, Ocean Vuong's interview, the New York Times interview.
Also, just like anytime he speak, like there was
Oh,
this American Life story he did, and he read an excerpt from his, I think, a book a few years ago, and I just remember sobbing walking around in North Brooklyn, and I was like, "What is that?" Yeah, I think feelings, like anything that sparks feelings, and I always oscillate very extremes. Like for me, it's like it's I call it the Hufflepuff content where it's like soft, fun, pretty. It's the Great British Bake Offs, it's the K-dramas because it's just fun seeing nice people helping each other do nice things, making cool, fun things, falling in love, people who look like us that are falling in love and and it's not even about the commercial aspect or that everyone's beautiful, but just like, oh, seeing a world filled with people living or acting like the way we want to see, even if it's like helping someone bake something. And then the other part of the emotional spectrum, which is like the deep rage that I feel. So like bell hooks but also speculative fiction. And then I also call it my vengeance media where I see like right now, and it depends on the time or where I'm at in life, but like that's where I was at in the last few years. And the other, the vengeance stuff is like middle-aged mom of color who is gonna go beat the crap out of somebody who wronged their family or even not, right? And it's just like, and just seeing that enacted is really kind of like empowering to like let you feel things and being like you're not crazy because they made a whole show about it. And so like just being able to have the space to do it, and then I can read the bell hooks, be like, okay, I can focus it, And so I think it all is anything that allows me to access those points and then not make me feel insane. And,
Yeah,
you know,
I love that for sure. Wanting to cry all the time, wanting to access the feelings, feeling the feelings. Amanda, you brought up Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, which I've picked up and put down because I cry when I try to read it. But yes, thank y'all so much for your responses to that question. I think we have just time for one more. How can we create more intergenerational spaces, i.e. with our parents' generation, which are meant just for us without that outside gaze? How can we use art for our own internal healing and dialogue? For example, let's see. Oh, the person who posed the questions shared that when they performed in the South Asian Vagina Monologues years ago, their mother left halfway through, but she read it at the breakfast table with her, and it felt so healing and safe for them. So, yeah, first part of that question was, how do we create more intergenerational spaces with our parents, with our grandparents, or our children?
therapy. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, I'm about it.
really quickly, I the this author Kevin Nguyen posted this article that he wrote. He was like, I tried interviewing my parents, and you should too. For the first time, I don't know why it took me this long. I interviewed my grandmother who lived through like multiple occupations of Vietnam, like from French colonialism, Japanese American, all of it. And it was like, I know it feels daunting at first, like, oh, interview, like it sounds so stuffy or stoic, but it was when I said like, I'll record you, we'll document this for future generations, there was a bigger invitation to do that. So yeah, I like interviewed my grandma, and it was kind of formal, but she kind of loved it. And so she was like hamming it up and she was like, let me say that again. Did you catch that? Like, and we're like, oh, okay, grandma really wants to do this. I guess she just thought she didn't want to overburden us with her trauma. And so we just made assumptions of each other. So an invitation to just interview your parents, maybe, if that's accessible.
And sometimes it's not accessible. Like I live for the glimpses into my dad's lived history because sometimes he is not in the mood.
Yeah.
Um, you know, despite, us sort of like talking about, our ancestral homeland, he's just like, no, just not interested right now. Let's just eat, yeah. But every once in a while, he just will be struck by inspiration. And I will hear stories I've never heard before. So for me, it's just the practice of having the conversation over and over again. The practice of, inviting the storytelling, because, won't happen every time, but I think we're all grateful for the times that, the magic, the universe allows it um, allows it to happen. I think I agree that I think our parents, our grandparents don't want to burden us, and they feel like this horrible set of traumas that they endured. They just want to keep locked away. But I think sort of the practice of just like continuing to ask about it um, is just inviting the possibility of repair for both generations.
Yeah. I think it doesn't always have to be formal, like a formal space. I mean, I know I'm joking therapy because, I've been in a lot of therapy, but, I really like the idea of like setting up a space that is normal, that is everyday, that's sustainable, so you can continue to show up and continue to ask the question over and over again. And, there are a lot of things that are universally, like, I love a moment where like suddenly you realize that your parents or grandparents love Breaking Bad and you do too. And it's like, or whatever, and so then that's a door, right? Or it's like a food thing or a smell or whatever. And so it's not just always putting it on the nose and putting it under like a lens that is so close. But like, how do you engineer a space? And the space can be an emotional one. It doesn't always have to be a physical one. And what little things can you have to kind of like trigger you into it? Um, yeah. I like the idea of like also being able to, because it allows you to also be able to receive when you're ready, curious, right? So you can continue to ask and not get exasperated over the repetition of it. Because I think that's something that can become unsustainable and breed resentment after some time.
I like
I
to think
really
about it
love
as like 1 million doors of stories, and it's like I have a bag of keys, and the bag is like constantly replenishing, and I don't know which keys are going to work, but I'm just like, okay, it's we're in a game. Let's go.
Yeah. Or like, when which key will work at this time. So just
right at this particular
Yeah.
time, 12 p.m. on a Sunday, and we're taking a walk.
okay.
That's really magical, a magical way to think of getting those stories and thinking about how to create those moments and those spaces. I especially love the let's just eat, like let's just eat right now. Let's not talk about stuff. It's so that's so real and familiar to me. In the interest and respect of everyone's time, we are 3 minutes over, so I do have to close out the conversation. But from today's discussion, I do hope that we continue to create those spaces for each other, invite each other to the table, continue to create and to be moved by art, move to use our own voices, and move to act for positive change and a brighter future. Yeah, thank you guys so much for this conversation. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, behind the scenes facilitators. Thank you, everyone who attended and asked questions and participated in the chat. there's a lot of connection happening there. So I'm like, I don't want to close the conversation. But again, yeah, thank
Be
you so
best
much.
friends or don't. I don't know.
Stay in
Thank
touch.
you for
Yes.
having us. It's really
So
nice.
you can find Janet, Natalie, and Amanda on Instagram, on socials. Check out their websites to see what they have in store, which is, I know, is going to be incredible. Thank you all so much.
It's so nice talking to you all. Seriously, it was like a lovely conversation. So
Made my Friday.
me
Yeah.
seriously, me too. Thank you.
Thank you all.